Committee, we've got Council President Sika, Councilor Wingfield, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Spadafora. And joining us tonight are Attorney Knott.
Did you mention Councilor Anderson?
I believe I did on committee. I thought I did. Councilor Anderson.
Right on.
We have Chris tonight.
The whole staff.
In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's revised guidelines on order by governor prohibiting assemblies from more than 10 people, this meeting is going to be conducted by remote participation. In-person attendance by members of the public is prohibited, and all effort will be made to permit public attendance at this meeting in the manner shared with the public previously. This will also be broadcast on normal access cable television, and it will be recorded. And also to inform the public, we have Resident John Mayera also recording this. On tonight's agenda, we have just one item. One agenda item is the annual appropriation order, and we will be joined tonight by DPW Director Bob Knox and Director of Board of Health, Chris Webb. Thank you both very much for joining us. I think without further ado, we'll just kick it off. Any volunteers to go first? I figure what we'll do is we'll give the department heads a couple minutes to have the floor for a couple minutes, and then we can proceed to questions by the councilors, if it sounds okay with everybody.
Sure.
All right. You guys want to flip a coin? Paper, rock, scissors?
I'll age before beauty. I'll let Bob go. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Director, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Under the circumstances that we're dealing with here with the COVID-19, you know, our staff is doing well. Our positions and our vacancies are in the budget, and I will do the best to operate under the budget given until, you know, better days are ahead of us. So I guess we're all going to do our part, and I think there'll be no problem with that with the DPW.
All right. Sorry.
Could oh, my sent it. Thank you.
Sorry, does somebody have a Councilor Murphy?
Yes, I was just trying to say, Councilor Trocro has been trying to get in, and I was trying to find the email to send it to her. I do have something to say, but I was trying to get it, and someone just said they sent it, so hopefully she's got it. So
she can do the same methodology where she comes in as an attendee, and we can just allow her in, because I think if you send yours, it'll come up with your name, but
well, I'm not sure who she got, but you should be on the lookout for her. She's coming. She's going to be arriving shortly.
All right.
Okay. I guess, you know, what I would say just, you know, about the budget in general, and I, you know, this is a unique budget in the fact that, you know, at least kind of the way that I'm looking at it, from my perspective, it's on template, whereas normally in our yearly lives of passing a budget, you know, we're doing this and we're passing a budget that we're going to live with for a year. And, you know, I think we all need to realize that come fall, we expect, so we need to do the best we can with this budget, but I think we also need to be very prepared, you know, for maybe additional cuts that might happen, you know, depending on what the revenues at the state look like and what local aid is actually going to wind up being. So, Mr. Knox, I'm very happy to hear you say, you know, that you're going to make it work within this budget, but I would also suggest to you that you look at that budget to see where, if you're asked in 3 or 4 months, where you might be able to cut, that you've been thinking about that as we move forward in this process, because that, you know, in all likelihood might be a scenario that we're faced with in the fall. So once again, I appreciate the fact that you're recognize the situation that we're in, and you're not looking for anything, but willing to live within the means of what's, been put before us to look at and come to some agreement on.
Thank you, Council. Yeah, absolutely. We're all in this together, and we'll make it work.
Any other councilors on committee? Oh, Councilor Winslow.
Well, I'm off committee, so yeah, but
I'm on committee.
okay, have Paul go.
Into your hands. Councilor Condon.
Thank you, Dave. I think Councilor Murphy made a very good point. I look at this document really as a working document, because we really don't know what to expect, because I think it's really impossible for the state and our own city controller and the mayor's office to they can come close to figuring out what our revenues might be, but that's subject to change, definitely. And I don't think I'm sure we'll get called in for a supplemental budget from the state once they get all their numbers together. And I'm sure Mr. Ranigan will come close to our estimates, but I'm sure there'll also be changes to the document we have. And I think we have to be prepared for that. And I guess I'd like to ask our DPW director, is there anything that strikes him as being unusual in this budget that he foresees may be a problem with the supplemental budget that we may get in August or September?
Council Condon, no, I'm able to work with what I have here, and if things change for the better, great. There's always more that we can do. If not, and things have to be cut further, then obviously what goes along with that is different services would have to be considered, a change to. But what I have in front of me, in the light of the situation that's going on, the DPW will continue to push forward and serve our citizens of Malden.
What about your personnel, Bob? Are you prepared to fill any of these vacancies?
I mean, everything's in the budget. Right before this all happened, we did have one employee that we offered a position to on the highway, which we decided not to bring him on right when everything was going on with, skeleton crews and all that. So there is one employee that we have in the pipeline for the highway side. On the water side, I mean, I have 4 employees in work if they're here every day and 5 vacancies over there. So it's my hope, that if we can get some good qualified candidates and things improve, that we can add some qualified staff over there. But again, with what we have and what we do during the day, we'll make it work. We'll have to, if we have to pull from highway to help water to help highway, or whatever we got to do, until we get a better look at this picture, we'll make it work.
I did want to ask you, as far as our water lead replacement program, where are we this year? I know we've had to be certainly set back due to the pandemic, but so far, what are your projections on water replacing our lead lines?
Between a combination of contractors through the engineering department and the DPW water staff, I don't see any problem reaching our allotment that we need to do. We are a little behind on normally where we would be at this point because of this, but not that far. I think we're around 35 lead service line replacements in-house, and that doesn't include what Yemen the engineering does. We normally do around 100 a year, and I think we should be pretty close to that number. So currently we're a few off, but we're still doing them as best as we can. And I don't think we'll have a problem reaching the DEP mandate.
Are you getting the cooperation of realtors as far as notification on any houses being sold and the replacement of those lead lines?
Yeah, so that goes to engineering. Engineering sends someone out to do the inspection of what they have, if they have lead on their side of copper and what's on the tie cards. But we've got the information. If they find that they have copper and we have lead on our side, or we've had no problems communicating because of the.
Hi, Councilor Di Maria.
Hi, my God. Crazy. I got in. Hello.
Bob, did you get cut off?
I did, yeah. I'm here though. Go ahead. Yeah. So I don't see any problems, Paul, with reaching the number the DET's mandating. I mean, obviously every year we'd like to go well over the exceeded amount, but I don't see any issue with that. And, you know, we're continuing to get work done internally with what we have. So again, we're a little behind, but at the end of the day, it's all going to pan out to getting that number.
May I jump in, Dave?
Absolutely. Councilor Anderson.
Yes, thank you. So Bob, your crew's working split shift, right? You know,
Came back. They came back to full time. The DPW union staff came back last Monday to full time, and the office staff has come back as of this Monday with some special accommodations as far as not opening to the public yet and keeping our office closed. But we're back to full staff at the DPW.
okay, so your ongoing maintenance then will continue as normal. I would have assumed that if you were still working a split shift that there would be an impact on your ongoing maintenance. But you're saying that given that you're back to full staff, you're back on schedule.
Yeah, so that's where I think the number talking about lead lines, you know, where we might be a little bit behind because we were down to having two water employees while we were on split shifts, which that's basically for emergencies, checking the sewers, but there was not a big push during that time for the lead service line. But now that we're back to full staff with all the DPW staff, we're continuing doing things such as pouring concrete and water, everything that we normally do, we're back to doing now.
Back to full strength.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Winslow.
Yeah, Bob, can you explain on the budget, there's a line item for solid waste collection, curbside, and solid waste disposal fees. What's the distinction there? Those are pretty big line items.
One of them is paid to the hauler for their contract, JRM, and the other one is paid for the trash removed. So one's for the hauler, one's for the amount of materials.
So are you finding since JRM is tightening up on the recycling side, are those fees increasing since like April when they've tried to crack down on the recycling thing?
Fees for what?
For the solid waste disposal fees, right? I mean, is our solid waste amounts going up now that we're doing maybe less recycling, or?
I don't know that we're necessarily doing a lot less recycling. People are still trying to recycle, but we're doing a lot more education out there and stuff's being left. I have to look at the numbers when we get the monthly report to see, but I wouldn't think there's a huge difference in amount of trash that is out there.
So you don't think like the tipping fees will necessarily increase next year then because of that? I noticed there's on the islands beautification, there's like a $22,000 increase. Is that for a particular project or?
That's for all the that's for all the beautification of the cutting, the maintaining of all the islands that you see out there, all Route 60, the islands, deltas. We put it out to bid, and they were the low bid of the new contractor at $67,000. There was a $30,000 difference from last year's winner, which was Mike's. So it was 67, and then it was like 92 or 93,000 was the second bidder. So that's a fixed cost to maintain all the islands and deltas in this.
Okay, so that's for everything citywide, not just a particular thing. And then, you know, porta potty is a small item, but I know this year we pulled them. I mean, when do you have to kind of let the contractor know whether we would need them for like next spring or whatever? So when do you usually sign that contract?
Well, the contract's already signed for the year. If you remember, we actually had them delivered and put out to the parks and had to pull them back. So they're just waiting on how this all pans out with the COVID-19 on when and if to put them back. So once we get that okay to do so, I'll call the company and they'll be back in that week.
So, but like, I mean, there may be some possibility that until like there's a vaccine, we don't put porta potties back out there. So,
Possibilities.
so that might be something we might hold off on until we know, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, you know, like it's tough to tell right now. You know, we're trying to work through this, and I mean, it could not happen where there are no porta potties all year, and it may happen that we get the okay in 2 weeks. We really don't know, but we have the placeholder there that normally would pay for that service. But with what's going on with the pandemic, we don't know, you know, we're going to need how much of that we're actually going to need.
And one final question, just on fuel cost. I mean, I know, you know, the price of diesel and gas is, you know, down significantly. Where does that come under, like facilities budget? Where does your fuel cost come in? I don't see a line item here. So where in the city?
Yeah, let me, so that would come out of operating costs, you know, parks operating, DPW operating, that would come out of the operating.
There's like a city operating budget. Let's see. So, okay.
It says it's out of the account DPW utilities, $200,000.
Okay, so some of that's all right. So that's fuel cost as well. Okay, so all right.
Right.
Because it seems like there could be some savings there ultimately. All right. What about the budget for just the water department itself and the annual, you know, fees for water? Anything happening on that front, or?
That doesn't have anything to do with me as far as the water sewer department. I handle the street portion of the street repairs, but I'm told that section is level funded, no rate increase to the payers.
All right, thank you very much. Great, thanks, Bob. Keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor DeMaria, please. Councilor DeMaria.
He's still muted.
Councilor DeMaria, am I muted or is?
Debbie's muted.
I don't hear
No,
Debbie.
I'm good. Don't mute anything. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so thank you, Councilor Kamel, and thank you, Director Knox. Appreciate your hard work within our DPW. Always a great department to work with. My question is, and it's a small one. I see a line item for Oak Grove Community Maintenance, Oak Grove Community Center Maintenance, and it's been consistent for 3 years, but if you could just share with me and the others what the $2,800 actually maintains.
What is it, Deb?
$2,835 under Oak Grove Community Center Maintenance.
That wouldn't be in my budget. That should be in Mr. Rubin's budget. He handles the.
Yes.
What facility?
Yep, you're right. Yep. Okay, I'll come back. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Condon.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Bob about what does the equipment look like? And have we done anything to upgrade some of these older trucks?
We do have a truck that was on order last year that will be coming in shortly, a new winter snow fighter truck, and we've repaired a lot of equipment. As far as this year, with what's going on, there's no new purchases on the table. We're basically going to have to just work to keep what we have going as long as we can until there's better days to look at the new purchases.
Do you foresee any kind of equipment that you think that you're absolutely going to need?
There's always, I guess, what I think down the road that we may need. But again, right now the goal is to keep what we have running. I mean, in a perfect world, if this wasn't going on, sure, certainly I could tell you some different things that the department could use. But my look at it this year is that we're going to keep what we have going as long as we possibly can until the day comes where we can make some purchases. And if that doesn't, happen in this budget, we'll get through it.
Bobby, I also wanted to ask you, have you seen any change in the way people are recycling at all? As far as cleaning up the contaminated recycling?
So I think a lot of it, there's a couple of different thoughts I have on it, just like anything else. I think the education piece is huge. We have a gentleman, Mr. Prince, that's out there every day on the trash route, working as a go-between between JRM and the residents. And he's doing a lot of handouts and education. Some people, after you speak to them one time, the problem's fixed. It's an ongoing battle. And you have to deal with also the communication barriers. I think, yes, to answer your question, that I've seen some change, but there's always a lot of work to do with keeping people educated on the new rules and what's going on, and also with the turnover of rental properties. You're dealing with different people in units all the time. So I think it's better, but there's a lot of work to still do.
Have you received any feedback from JRM on the recycling? Seems to be a little improving a little bit?
I mean, they still consider it as contaminated and dirty recycling. But again, they know they're tagging stops as well as our employee, Mr. Prince. So I think they can see that we're getting across to some people. And again, I think it's just an ongoing education piece that has to continue to clean it up.
I don't know if it's my imagination, but I'm seeing more blue bags out there than before, because for the past several years, it was amazing to me that how people could put out trash and you wouldn't see a blue bag out there.
Yeah.
But now I seem to be seeing more blue bags out there, and I don't know if you've seen it in how many blue bags sales are.
Yeah, I could check with Mr. Ranigan on the sales of the blue bags, but it does kind of make sense with more people being home, generating more trash during this time. And to be quite honest with you, some people, as we don't want to admit it, probably taking their household trash other places, like their work or whatever. So people are home, they're going to generate more trash. So yeah, there probably is an uptick in bag sales and tonnage.
All right, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Councilor Conlon. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Councilor Kamel. Thanks, Bob, for coming out today. So I know that in the past, a good economy where we have a big construction market makes it very difficult for us to recruit staff and keep staff because they get paid so much in the private market. I mean, do you see potential opportunity to get some good recruits now? I know it's tough because staffing levels, but
it's my hope that we will. I think that during all these times, when people actually start to come back out into the communities, that I'm hoping that we're going to have more qualified candidates that are looking for these positions. With what's going on, whether they unfortunately lost their job whatever. So I'm hopeful that as bad as things are, I'm hopeful that things are going to move better for us with hiring some good qualified employees that are looking to stay and make a career here. So that's my hope.
And then one of the reasons why I asked is because I know that the overtime is being reduced. I saw two different numbers on the sheet. In the line item breakdown, it shows it going from a budgeted of 150 in 2020, and the actuals are actually are projected to be over this year. But it shows it going from 150 down to 100 in the line items. But then under the consolidated list that talks about the various cost saving measures, it was set at 75. Do you know, is the overtime at 100 or 75?
So the overtime budget for the past few years has been 150.
Mm-hmm.
This year it's been cut to 100,000.
Okay.
So it's 50,000 less, and I'll have to make some decisions on how we can get it to the number that we need to be at.
The only reason I ask is it looks, we have a tab that says budget contingency, and it says it's been reduced to 75. So I think we probably just want to take that offline and figure out what the number is on that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. What the document that I have has it going from 150 to 100.
Sounds good. And then in our last meeting, I had talked about generally how I'd like to see us think outside the box when it comes to trying to find more operational efficiencies and become more of a efficient and productive entity, and ideally without impacting the services that are provided or staffing levels. Can you think of any ways or any other departments that could be rolled into the DPW? The first one that comes to my mind is like the cemetery department, in terms of like making sure there's a lot of, I think, parallel responsibilities between what the cemetery workers are doing and what the DPW is doing. I mean, do you see anything like that being a possibility?
So I can tell you that every city does things a little differently as far as that goes. And even in Malden at one time, the DPW was separate from the water sewer, and water sewer was under engineering, and then it was put back under DPW. So there's a lot of things that could go hand in hand and that are moving pieces. I can tell you, as of what we have under the DPW now, is a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And for what we have for staffing. But again, down the road, could something be reorganized where something's taken away and something's added? I'm sure that's what's happened over the last 27 years I've been here, where things have been bounced to different responsibility, different department heads. So I guess it's a possibility that things could change again down the road.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate the candidness.
Thank you.
Just a point of information here. If Controller Rannigan is here, is there a possibility that the budget contingency that includes 75,000 is some of that 75,000 is actually being reduced in some non-salary, like pension or health insurance or something like that?
Hello?
Hi, sorry.
Yeah,
You can hear you.
I'm here. So Councilor O'Malley just mentioned that. I'm looking at that now. So I do see.
We'll put you on the spot.
What's that?
Sorry, I didn't want to put you on the spot. I thought it just might be something like it was, 50,000 was in the salary and 25 was in something like insurance.
All I did was print out the DPW budget. I don't have the budget contingency in front of me, but I do see that the DPW overtime was reduced by 50,000. If the contingency is actually 75, it might be taking part of a vacancy. The only thing I can think of is we have 3 vacancies or so built into the DPW budget. We might be assuming that someone won't start on July 1st, and it might be 1 quarter into it that they start. I'd have to investigate that a little bit more to figure out where the additional $25,000 came from, though.
Okay. All right. Okay, Council Spataford. You are muted. Craig, you're muted.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Sorry about that. For some reason I have to hit it twice. Thank you, Mr. Knox. I appreciate you coming, as always.
Thank you.
I think a lot of the questions since I first raised my virtual hand has been asked, but I know there's a contingency plan based on our files, and it has your overtime budget being cut. My question to you would be is, if we had to cut deeper, what would you do? What would be like the next step for you? Certainly you don't have a lot of personnel. Are there services that we could relinquish pretty quickly to save money? Because at this point, you're pretty much tapped out given staffing, overtime. But if you had to dig a little deeper, even if it was $20,000, my question would be, could you find it within the budget without laying a body off?
Well, I think you can always find it, but that would obviously, without laying a body up, but it would certainly cut into services that we could provide. So, I mean, if you said to me today, I had to cut $20,000, well, that's $20,000 less of sidewalks or potholes that are filled, or, maybe we don't street sweep every day. There's many different things. If I had to do it, I'd have to make that decision, but it definitely would have to cut into what the city services are.
Yeah, agreed. And again, I apologize for being, not having too many other questions, Mr. Knox. Obviously, I know given the large amount of work you cover, and we seem to be adding, bringing new things online all the time, and the DPW does a great job. Hopefully we have a mild winter, right? I mean, that's always fingers crossed. But I would just say to my colleagues, we obviously know what is coming down the pike, right? And not to create a doomsday scenario, but it looks like the longer it takes to get back as a country from an economic standpoint to some type of normalcy, the revenues are going to be a challenge, right? And I would just say, when I look at somebody like, and I would look at this, every budget would be the same, but when I look at Mr. Knox's budget, if I had to dig deeper, certainly making the meridian strips look beautiful are worth it. But I would personally think as a council, we would start looking at some hard choices before we lay anybody off. I mean, overtime is always sometimes easy to do, but even beautification processes, maybe closing some parks at a certain time, maybe not doing certain things. Because the last thing I would want to see happen is it gets worse, and we're stuck in a place where the only levers we have to pull are bodies, and the last thing you want to do is see somebody out without a job, without insurance during this economic time. So again, I think we should just all be looking at that what if scenario as we go through this budget for possibly next year and possibly maybe the year after. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Knox.
Thank you. Yeah, I certainly would not want to see any hardworking men and women, have to face that situation. So we do everything we can to avoid that.
Agreed.
Councilor DiMaria.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. I'm working on my phone. I apologize. And I'm going to try again, Bobby. So I'm
right.
really, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So the line item for triangle employment, I have to say I'm very happy that we utilize our people with ability. And I see that you've kind of gone up by $10,000 on that. And could you just explain how we use our people with ability, and if in fact we could even use them more to help with some of the budget items?
Well, what we do have from them is a great assistance. Basically, they're utilized to clean up different areas of the city, or be a second pair of hands in emptying barrels or cleaning a park. These employees do not drive, so they work alongside with the full-time DPW staff. Great help to us, but they're not going to be able to plow snow or do concrete sidewalks. They're a great help in doing various different cleanups throughout the city. and being a second pair of hands along with a full-time DPW employee.
Mhm. Yeah, I actually think it's absolutely wonderful, and I applaud you for that. And the only thing that I might suggest, if we do have to cut something, that maybe we could, and I hate to use backfill, but to utilize them a little bit more, because I think that they are a great resource and it's win-win. So, and that's triangle employment first. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Council Murphy.
Thank you, Chairperson. I actually had two things that I wanted to talk about, and actually, I'm glad Mr. Ranigan's on here, and Councilor Spatafora actually touched on it, actually touched on both things that I wanted to say. One was snow. I noticed we budgeted the 200,000 again this year. Mr. Ranigan, I know we've had some heavy years where we're running, carried over money. Is this year a year that we're not paying anything on past storms?
We're always a year behind on that. So we always budget $200,000. That's the one account in the city that we're legally allowed to run a deficit.
Right.
So nobody knows what the snow and ice total costs for next year are going to be. If we were to increase the appropriation above $200,000, we would be on the hook to keep that increase year after year, meaning in FY 2022, 23, we would have to, if we increased it from 200 to 500,000, we'd always be on the hook to budget $500,000. This year was a great year. We didn't have that much of a deficit. So in the FY 2021 budget, we're once again budgeting $200,000. We're legally allowed to run a deficit. If we do, they call it raising it on the tax recap. Come November, when we file the tax recap with the Mass Department of Revenue, we include those additional funds. So we raise the deficit after the passage of the budget. So right now, like I said, we don't know what the deficit's going to be, but we're sticking with that $200,000 appropriation. So we're not on the hook to budget additional monies in future years.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, actually, I had wrote down something when I'm not sure who exactly said it, but I know I saw a sign when I was driving today that said, "We're in this together." And we are all in this together. And it's not just the folks that are sitting here talking about this budget or listening, to this webinar or logged on. It's the entire city. So, Mr. Knox, one of the things I would challenge you to look at is how we can communicate with the public to tell them what they can do to help us. And by that, I mean, I sometimes get aggravated, I will use that term, when I look at See Click Fix and I see that someone has said, there's a broken bottle in front of my house, and we send someone out to clean it up. Personally, I'd like to say to them, go get a broom and sweep it up. What I'd like is maybe some things that we could work with and say to the people, when you call for something like this, this is what it costs. This is what it costs to send a man in a truck out, to pick up trash in front of your house, to sweep up a broken bottle in front of your house. Because I think this is the time when people really are getting the fact that we are in this together. There's huge budget cuts coming down. We don't want to impact the schools, DPW, personnel, etc. But I think we need to kind of be the forefront of this, of saying, people, please help us. Because just even with like 4th of July, I've found if I ask someone to do something, they're more than willing to do it. They just don't always come to the forefront to volunteer. So I think that's something we need to think about, and see if beautification comes into it. Okay, Sean here down in Ward 5, and I did the island on Bainbridge Street and Rockwell. Okay, I know that in Ward 3, a gentleman went out and he adopted an island. And I know Friends of the Malden River have offered to do an island. So maybe there's some ways that we can actually involve our community and have them help us cut corners so that we do have the money left for the teachers and the police, the fire and the DPW workers. So I think that's something we can all put our heads together about.
Yeah, I think that C-Click Fix definitely is a tool that's utilized for some good requests, and so we have communications with the residents. But like you said, I think some people also are requesting things that normally a regular taxpayer, if there was a broken bottle in front of my house, I wouldn't call the DPW to clean it up, and I would pick it up. But some things are to that extreme to certain people. But so yeah, it's finding a happy medium, and it definitely, with things that are going on, we're gonna have to see how this all plays out with how much and how quick we can respond to things.
Thank you. But I guess in closing, what I would say is, I think it's a conversation we should continue to have even as a council, to just see if we can get some type of a message out to the public as to what they can do to help us in this situation. So, thank you.
Thank you.
What a nice point, Councilor Murphy. Yeah, that's,
I
yeah,
agree.
great idea. Yeah. I see that same thing, that people are asking for the city, looking for someone else to do things that back in the day, people would usually be glad to do on their own. So some kind of a public service campaign we should be thinking about to encourage people to roll up their sleeves, and we're all in this together. So, yeah, good point, Barbara.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson.
I just want to quickly agree with Councilors Murphy and Anderson there. Often I'll hear people say, just as Councilor Anderson said, phrase things in the way the city should, ... And I always want to say, you are the city. We are the city all together. So I want to agree. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, if there's no strong objections, we're going to have Councilor Condon go, and then I think we'll move on to Mr. Webb, because I definitely want to give some time to what he's been going through this past few months. Okay. Councilor Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad Mr. Ranigan's here, because I want to pick his brain a little bit on what he has learned that we haven't been privy to, as far as anything from the state that might be coming out, when it might be coming out, and if it's going to be a supplemental budget, and when that might occur. And finally, I'd just like to say I like his haircut tonight. But I'd like to hear some feedback from our controller, Mr. Ranigan, on what we can expect as a finance committee.
Yeah, so just to start, I did finally yesterday go get my hair cut at the same place Chris Webb got his haircut last week, right in downtown Malden. Feels good. But yeah, in terms of what's coming from the state, Councilor, your guess is as good as mine, and that's as good as anybody else's. Nobody knows. We're being told a lot of different information. All of which include very large cuts, between 15 to 30 to 40% on local aid, local receipts in terms of meals tax, excise tax, parking tickets, that we can kind of gauge ourselves. But the local aid piece, the Chapter 70, the unrestricted local aid, that's the big unknown. So what we've done in this budget is taken a best guess estimate as to what it might be. And we've placed that budget contingency, that $4.1 million in reserves, hoping that we're close. If the cuts are further, and they very well may be, we'll be sitting back here all together in September or October, having further discussions about where to cut from. But, I think this initial step, the way that, we have referred to this is our down payment on the cuts that we all know are coming. What those cuts are going to be, nobody knows. I don't have an answer for you there, but I think we've made a great first step at addressing those cuts.
As far as the stabilization fund, you mentioned $4.1 million. How much of a percentage cut-wise would that be able to put us on a break even?
So right now it is a break. Well, it's a level funded budget going from this current fiscal year into next year when you back out that budget contingency account. So I want to say it was like 3.5%.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome.
Dave, you're muted.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. So thank you, Director Knox, for walking us through all those questions. We appreciate it. And thank you, Controller Ranigan, for including some color commentary in here about some of the realities that we should all be cognizant of.
Thank you so much.
I do want to be cognizant of time here. I want to kind of move on quickly if we can, and give a little bit of opportunity to Chris Webb from Board of Health. Has had quite a few challenges thrown at his department. So want to give him a few minutes here to have the floor and sort of frame the conversation, and then we can move on to some questions. Sound good? All right, great. Mr. Webb.
Chris, you're still muted.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Much like Bobby, you know, it is what it is. A level funded budget is something we can work with. You know, we have obviously, with all the work we've been doing lately, we dream of expansion, but we know that's not meant to be right now. The only thing we're really struggling with is vehicles. We've got a 2002 and a 2003 Mercury wagon and an Explorer that are just, they're money pits, basically. I think we can keep the Mercury wagon going relatively inexpensively, but the Explorer is getting very expensive. And time will tell whether it makes it through the summer. The other issues that we have are, you know, the only thing that's forecasting out there is flu vaccine. What's it going to cost? What versions, how many different versions are we going to have? And what will the cost be? Is there going to be a COVID shot, or is it going to be a flu shot in COVID? We don't know. So we've not ordered anything yet because it just doesn't make sense to. I'm concerned about that price because my vaccine line item is $10,000. I think looking at where the prices have gone during this pandemic, that's not going to make it for us. Between that $10,000 and the vaccine covers the clinic TB program, the well child program, and the flu program. So there may be a stretch, but we won't know until we know more about what vaccines are going to be for this year. So I'll make it work with 10,000 to the best that we can, but when the prices come out, it might dictate what we can and cannot do as far as vaccinating as many people as we want. So that'll be a discussion for another day. COVID, we're working on a program right now that I estimated about $15,000 to do testing for all the senior buildings. But we're either going to put that into the CARES Act funding, hopefully. And once it goes there, of course, we won't be able to reimburse. But even if we had to, if it was $15,000 or $20,000, we'd get 75% of that back in reimbursement. So it would be 25% of that would be the cost. And we probably want to think about a little rainy day fund for surge funding in case coming into late August, early September, we have an uptick again. I think influenza will be our worst enemy this year because it will hide a lot of the COVID cases in the early days during the infectious period. So that's my only concern about budget really is what happens if we have another surge. Is the state and federal government going to be as supportive in the future? I don't know. We've gotten good amount of money to do what we need to do now. I've got probably $20,000 left of the $55,000 that was given. I've got more emergency preparedness money coming in the next year's budget to cover the equipment that we put out this year. So I don't see that as a recovery process for us. Isn't my concern. It's if there's a surge. So I want the council and the finance committee to, keep that in the back of your mind. It could be an unexpected expense. But other than that, I'm much like Bobby. We've worked with this budget and we can continue to.
All right, thank you, Mr. Webb. Looks like we've got Council Smith. You are muted. We will come back to Council Spatafora. We've got Council Murphy.
Sorry, I thought you were going to Council Spatafora.
No, he's going to trouble, so we'll connect him.
Okay. Mr. Webb, on behalf of all of us, the entire city, I just want to thank you and your staff and the Board of Health. I mean, I know that this is something that is not something you ever wished would happen, and I know that you have just been going nonstop since it started. And I know your whole team has, so I just want to make sure that we, first off, thank you for that, because you've also had yourself in harm's way quite a bit. And, that's something that's, tough to do when you're, going home to your own family. So I did want to talk a little bit, and I get where you're coming from, and you're probably the one department that I actually am going to kind of reach out of the park here, but you've always struggled with nurses. I mean, I've, been in budget meetings before with you, just trying to get part-time nurses because, of the fact that pre-COVID, just even following up on TB cases and the tracking needs to go on with that. As a finance person here, I just want to say that this is the department that I think in the future, as we look at what's going on here, that we understand we need to put aside some contingency money to be able to make sure that he has the staff he needs to keep this community safe. I mean, he runs on a very shoestring staff as it is, limited grant funds. Thank goodness you have received, some reimbursement from the state. But like you said, if that doesn't come down the track again, next time, we need to be prepared to use some of our contingency to make sure that is well staffed and has not only the vaccines that it needs, but also I would think and Mr. Webb, I ask you to speak to this. I would think that we need to stockpile certain types of equipment so that we're prepared for the future, for any future that's in front of us, and not be in a position where we're waiting, to get things little by little. I think we need to make sure that there's plenty of hand sanitizer, within the city hall system, that there's plenty of mask availability, and any personal protective equipment that the police, fire, and the healthcare workers need. So I'm not sure if that's been built into the budget, but that's of extreme concern to me to know the answer to that. And I'm sure between Mr. Webb and Mr. Ranigan, we'll hear if it is there.
Well, from my estimation of the budget, no, it's not. We've always had those emergency preparedness funds from grants, and we've been using that money for the last 11 years to have the stockpile of masks. That's how we started the pandemic was we actually had about 3,000 masks in stock. So we were able to get police and fire masked up pretty quick. Those supplies are gone. I'm down to children's masks from that supply, and that's going to be used for when the kids go in to clean out their lockers at school. We will replenish that. I have funds right now, and we'll get more emergency preparedness money in July. As a region, we will be buying a lot of restockpile material and some more shelter equipment. We think that might be one spot we're a little weak on. So, with partitions, this has taught us a little bit more about isolation. We might have to build at least one isolation ward in every shelter that we set up. So we're going to be working on stuff like that with that money. But the city budget really hasn't covered a lot of, or any that I've bought, emergency preparedness equipment.
I think, folks, that's something that, we need to not be the ostrich with our heads in the sand on this one. I think we really need to start thinking about, having some funds put aside to make sure that we can take care of ourselves, and, that we're not waiting on someone else to give us what we need and what our citizens need. So just point of thought that I think we all should keep in mind.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy. Councilor Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, thank you for your hard work. Can you give us an update on, we had a rodent situation. Can you give us an update on that across the city and where we are? You're wearing a lot of hats these days. I understand that. But
yeah.
First, let's start with that.
Well, the rodent account isn't in my control anymore. But Eric Rubin's been excellent about being able to support those issues that have popped up. We've in the one you're speaking about in Ward 3, we had the MBTA pay for that. There's some issue out on the Fellsway East. We're looking at that. That might be another place where we bait. And right now, they don't have a whole lot of other issues with rodent control right now, except where we're falling around behind the new road work that's coming in. Mr. Lip is going to be, as part of last year's policy, moving forward to put bait stations out on road work sites to protect the properties on the road. It worked well at the end of last year. It wasn't obscenely expensive, which was really something to surprise us all. And we get our bang for our buck. The complaints drop when we do that.
Can you give us an update on, we're taking a hit naturally, especially from all the restaurants on our food tax program, where we are and what to expect in the next couple of weeks on who might open up to help us out with our revenues here and what we can expect?
Well, right now the allowances I like to call it Phase 2, Part 1 and 2. Phase 2, Part 1 will be dining outside only. I think that will last probably 2 weeks. And then the middle of the third week, once they get more guidance out for the indoor dining, Part 2 will come on, and that will be when you can have outdoor and indoor dining. That Part 2 is, I think, where you'll see a majority of the restaurants go outside. For most of the smaller restaurants, 50 seats and under, going outside with 8 tables isn't going to pay the light bill. So a lot of them won't do it until it's indoor dining. And a lot of them don't have space to do it outdoors. If they take the sidewalk in front of their place, they might get 4 tables. Look at Ferry Street, the Eastern Avenue. There's just not a lot of places. The ones that have it now, I think, will be the only ones, besides Faces Brewery, that do it. That's the feedback I'm getting right now.
When will they be able to have bar service and people can get a drink with their food?
That's going
Or
to
is
be
that
phase.
out of the picture?
Well, you can order a drink with your food in part 1 and 2. You just can't sit at a bar and consume alcohol. It has to be used for dining. So you don't lose your alcohol sales. You just can't sit at the bar. That's just because you can't be within 6 feet of the bartender. You got to give him a chance to work and be safe. So the phase 1, part 1 of phase 2 will, I believe, be June 8th. The numbers are really good. I just got off a call before this one. The infectious rate is down to 6.8%. Last week it was 11. So that's a 2-week average balance down to 6.8. And if 2 weeks from now, I'm assuming it's going to be at around probably 6. And 5% is a really good number. That's the number we look at for annual influenza. So that's where we want to be. That will be the trigger, I think, for phase 3, getting to 5%. So first phase, June 8th, dining in and out will probably 2 weeks after that. So somewhere in the middle of that, just before the 4th of July weekend, I fully expect that the way they've been rolling these things out, they really did a masterful job working with the calendar and the testing and correlation of data so that it meets certain holidays. I don't know if they figured it out themselves or it just happened that way. I'd like to think they figured it out. And it will hit at the right times, I think. I think we're going to look at July as a very busy month for restaurants. The thing is, everybody we talk to says, who's going to go out? That's going to be the question. How many people are going to be comfortable? I think a lot of people will try it, but I don't think they'll be very comfortable for very long. So it's hard to say.
Phase 2, part 1, the restaurants will be able to have liquor sales. Will that include all our organizations too?
Yes, it will. We're going to put all of the organizations into the restaurant category because the simple fact is the infectious rate is down. And when you start looking at your social distancing requirement and the 6-foot distance for tables, you're going to lose a lot of your seating in most of those clubs, and it will make it safe. I think it'll push a lot of seating outside, which is fine too. But I think the clubs will find a good, reasonable ways to get membership in and out. And it's going to take a little work on their part, but for the most part, I think they're ready.
So that'll be 40% of the maximum seating?
No, they took out the 40% requirement. It's only going to be that many seats that you can fit as long as they're 6 feet apart. So that's not table to table. That's chair with a person in it to chair with a person in it. So it's person to person, not table to table. So, figure about, they're going to need to be about 7.5 feet apart, table to table, I think is a reasonable number. So, where we can, we'll come up with good ideas about pushing things against the tables and getting people closer to doors where they may not have sat before. It's going to be different than we're used to. That's for sure.
So that'll kick off June 8th, next Monday.
Yes, that's what I believe. The governor's going to come out on Saturday and let us know whether it's on or off.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilor Connor. We're going to stay on committee and go to Councilor DiMaria.
Thank you, Councilor Kamel, and thank you, Director Webb, for unbelievable what you and your department are going through right now. I do have a couple of questions, so I'm going to try to ask them fast. What is your process for inspections as we're going from phase to phase? How many inspectors do you have? And if you could just share with us how you manage that.
Right now we have 4 inspectors, and we 3 full-time, 1 part-time inspector. What we stopped doing rental unit inspections on March 14th to free up Mr. Powers and Mr. Liu to handle complaints and information and education. And Elsa has been handling all of the restaurants. That program, we just keep it going plugging along. We never meet our annual requirement for 2 inspections a year. But this year, I think we probably will. Our plan for the restaurant openings is we'll have all of the inspectors out, myself included, to on the 8th, just to let people see us and ask us questions. And I'm not getting any questions right now, which is surprising. Although I did send out information today about patios and liquor license things. A bunch of information went out today, checklists and things. So I'm hopeful that they'll take the next couple of days, read it over, make a plan, and our phones will come off the hook on Monday. And we'll be able to get out there in a week in advance and get restaurants open by mid to, Wednesday, Thursday next week, realistically.
Great, thank you. And I heard that you utilized the school nurses to help somehow. So if
We
you could
did,
share that,
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Luckily, we also do their training. We do their quarterly training. So we teach them Narcan and all the other things that we do. And they take it great. They love the training. So because of that, with that working relationship, when the time came, their supervisor, Patty Tremendozi, gave us a call and said, "What do you need?" She was volunteering anyway. She put it out to the other nurses, and to a person, they stepped up and relieved a lot of the pressure that we didn't have that, we would have been in big trouble.
Yeah,
The contact tracing group that the state has put together is okay, but I wouldn't be comfortable with the data. The data is everything. And if you remember early on, it was very hard to get, and only because we're using new systems and the data was coming very quickly. We caught up with very fast once those nurses came on board, and we even took on the CHA clinic down on Canal Street, making the phone calls for that. So, and Ron Cochran deserves a pat on the back. He put together the process for us to get that done. Everybody was comfortable with it and was on it. And the first day, I don't remember a technical question coming up throughout this whole process. So that's a good thing.
That's great. Do you know off the top of your head what you receive in your department on grant funding?
For all overall?
Overall, just approximate?
150. Probably a little, let's see, 150. This year, I think it's going to be a little over 200,000.
Okay, that's good, because it's definitely, looking at your budget, you certainly can use it. Yeah. And that's great. That's about 200. And I do have to tell you that my husband and I did get tested at Cambridge Health, and Maria was wonderful. She was just terrific, and we were negative. So I honestly, great job. Thank you so much for holding tight to this terrible crisis and being the leader that you are. So.
Well, we're doing, it's like I tell you every year, we get great compliments every year when there's something goes sideways. It's the people we hire. It really is.
Yeah.
I've got a great group. It's from the bottom up sometimes. And, we all pick each other up and keep going. That's all I can say. They're great.
Great.
Absolutely great.
Thank you, Director Webb.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council DiMaria. Council Spatafora.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, now you can't see me, Chris, right? So I got to turn my video on there.
I wanted to see the beard again. Yes.
Yeah, I know.
It looks good. I like it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Webb. Again, a lot of questions were already asked, waiting my turn in line. But my question is going to be more targeted towards, after 9/11, cities had this influx of cash and resources dedicated towards security, and that filled the gamut, right? I know there was resources coming everywhere, right? You had all this type of money for radios and equipment, and I don't know if we're going to foresee that, just because I think we're up to $3 trillion now that the government's been giving out to everybody. My question to you would be, if funding becomes available specific to your department, the Board of Health, to help ensure, future pandemics and being ready to help with any type of health crisis, which would probably be more towards the pandemic level. Are there plans ready in place to be prepared for the next round given no funding or additional spend coming in from the federal government for pandemics of the like?
We have plans, but those plans do have, there are equipment costs that come with them. So we could not have covered the expense of this pandemic to this point with the current budget. Would never have happened. We got $55,000 from the Department of Public Health almost at day one. We also got a $2,500 grant from the RISE organization, which we're putting to use in for people who are displaced and need treatment. So we've got that part going very strong. Paul's placing a lot of people even in this pandemic, which is, I didn't think was possible, but he's pulling it off. But no, the answer is no. We have plans. We just know what they cost. Like right now, we're probably looking at least, I'm going to say $60,000 in equipment that we're going to have to replace. That being masks, gowns, gloves, sanitizer, the number of, the Band-Aids that we've given out, all the little things that add up. And we're going to be meeting, emergency management group is meeting tomorrow to discuss all of that and look down the road and talk with our friends at MEMA.
And my final question too would be, does the pandemic, and I know it kind of does, but do you think it will have any long-term effect on things like the flu clinic and doing those other things that you do on a daily basis? Because certainly protocols and procedures will need to be followed regardless of cost or budget line items.
Yes, I do think that the flu clinics we see in the next at least 2 to 3 years are going to look more like those flu clinics we saw for the H1N1 outbreak. The lines are going to be long. The process is going to be a little more involved than it has been in the past because we're going to want to be able to trace these people against the data we already have. So there's going to be a lot of epidemiological work done in the background, which won't cost us anything, but there will be costs. I'm concerned about this year. How much vaccine can I buy with what I have? And I'm hopeful that I can put 5,000 or 6,000 aside from some of the funding I've already received and convert that over to vaccinating people for influenza/COVID. We're going to call our clinics more of a surveillance spot. We're going to be doing checks on people, what their status was during the pandemic and what it is at the flu clinic time, because that's going to be exactly the same time that COVID should come back. If it's going to resurge, it will resurge during the flu period because it will be misdiagnosed, or people will think it's the flu and they'll wait too long and we'll be spreading, infection everywhere.
Like it may already have happened in December or January. They're saying the same thing.
Exactly. It's exactly what happened in January. Yeah.
And then
it will happen again.
And then I appreciate the answers. And Mr. Chairman, before I turn it back over, I would just say this, probably 9 weeks ago, most people probably didn't see the word public health in everyday paper, but it doesn't take too much now to pick up any type of periodical. It could be a financial one. It could be a regular newspaper. But I would just say, regardless of who's paying for vaccination and public health, we have to make sure that we keep the budget line items in there for substantial help for the vulnerable population, not only because of their economic status, but there is an economic impact, whether to the federal government or the municipality. And I think this is something we have to prepare for, because everything you read, small dollars go a long way in these programs at any time of the year, but certainly now with this virus the way it is. But more importantly, I think the last thing we want to do is put any more financial burden, never mind a health burden, on an individual on the city's dime. And I think by just making sure we have enough money in the budget for vaccinations and pre-treatment for some of these things. I was going to use the word preemptive strike, but I think it's important that we look at it from that aspect. So again, thank you, Mr. Webb. Thank you, Chairman Kamel.
Chairman Kamel, can I just jump in for a quick question? I don't see my place on the screen for my electronic waving of a hand, so I apologize for just jumping in, but may I?
Councilman.
Yes, thank you. Chris, just back to the budget for a second. Small item. I noticed that your geese control is kind of level funded.
Yes.
Tell me how you're spending that money.
That's a contract with the USDA to remove geese from city property. Fellsmere Pond in particular. We do a little bit of work down at Dever. We've done a little bit of work near the bridge at Charles Street. Wherever the geese pop up, they've been at Salem Wood Field. So we have them removed.
How do they do it?
On that contract.
Chris, how do they do that?
They net the animals with they use a shotgun that shoots a net, and they scoop them all up and they dispose of them.
Dispose of them or relocate them?
Dispose.
Ooh,
They put them in a trailer, they're gassed, and then they're disposed of. It's humane.
I see. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilor O'Malley.
Well, it's hard to follow up on that one, but
Yeah.
not in the usual manner. That didn't sound good at all. I was going to ask about the geese also, actually.
I thought they were
Yeah.
protected.
Do we need to do that? Money
To
well worth it?
relocate the geese?
Yeah, do we need to do that?
Yeah, I think they do more damage in a given year if left to their own devices than $3,100. It gets to the point where you can't even walk at Fellsmere Pond if we don't do it. And the other locations, if they harbor in and start nesting, we have a whole nother problem. So that's what we're always trying to do, is keep them from nesting. We always get out early, before the nesting period, get a sense of where they are. We know where they are. We've even oiled eggs. We've tried everything. The only one that's really been effective is this program. And at those dollars from the federal government, it's a pretty good buy.
I've heard of this stuff happening. I didn't know that we were paying for it, but I've heard the instances of these masked men, these people in black coming up with a van and attacking the geese, and I had no idea what it was us paying for it. I'll put that on. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councilor Winslow.
Yeah, Chris, I was just curious about the status of the Mass in Motion program grants, and what's the current work plan for that, and where that is going in the future? I know that in the past we've gotten about $40,000 for that, and that I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's $50,000. It's going to be level funded, is the word we got. So I'm anticipating $50,000 this year. The focus of that money this year is to complete the food assessment. And we're going to be working on the partnership with the Malden River Group to do some more outreach and education around the river, as well as healthy living options and things like that. We've got complete streets in there, and there's some work around the community garden as far as food insecurities.
Yeah, I know one of the things as we challenge going forward with the pandemic, there's this effort called, the slow streets or whatever. So I'm just, that seems, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to hire the transportation planner we had. And I know Murphy is stepping away from the walkability committee. So it would be great if we could, continue to have that involvement of that committee from Mass in Motion, because there's a resource we're having to sacrifice to try to balance the budget here. So I just put in the word there. It's
I'm hopeful Christine will get back to the group. I just don't think she has the time to be chairperson.
Yeah. So I guess we got to work with that group. If
we reconfigure. I think we'll be all set.
All right. Thank you.
Yes,
you.
sir.
Keep up the great work. And I know it's a hard time. Thank you.
Before
Thank
you change topics, could you just elaborate what the Mass in Motion grant is and where the money's going? I was kind of confused.
It's $50,000 a year from the Department of Public Health. It's spread out over the Malden is Moving program, which consists of the Complete Streets program, food insecurity. We're doing a food assessment right now to determine who really in the city is food insecure, right down to the individual person. And we're trying to get outreach to the river groups and things like that, where we can promote healthy lifestyles. So those will be our focus this year, unless the food assessment tells us we have to do a lot more work than we think. It's only halfway done, and we'll probably know more in 2 months.
Sorry.
Great, thank you. So we're going to go to Councilor Crowe for the last question.
I didn't have my hand up.
Well, put your wave right here.
I just will, I will just say that Council O'Malley is really working on policies and protocols. It's not necessarily programming.
Yeah.
The mass in motion kind of is sort of how to figure out how you systemically make these changes for healthy eating and active living. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So just a time check here. We're at 6:55. Do we? Okay, so it looks like we have Councilor Condon, then we're going to do Councilor O'Malley one more time, and then
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Chris, is there anything in this budget do you feel that is missing, that if you had a ability to add to the budget, that you would request it?
It's hard to think that way. I mean, I looked at the budget and it's level funded, and it's been this way for, I think, 3, maybe 4 years. So it's what we're used to working with. Ultimately, the things that would move this department forward are expensive. Ultimately, that's staff. We have, don't get me wrong, I am grateful. The best thing that ever happened to me was the part-time nurse that we have, that we got 2 years ago. That 19 hours is incalculable. For the hours that she works, we probably get 40, 50 hours out of her in the 19 hours that she's here. She's incredible. But that's where we're at. We're at a point now where the city has grown so much. We're doing the housing issues. We're doing the restaurants. We're doing the complaints. All the things that go into what the health department does. But we're doing it with the same amount of people that 8 years ago, 10 years ago now, weren't here. I mean, when I was running PIPs, I just watched the population grow every day. And part of my concern through that whole budgeting process was we were falling behind staff-wise, because we can't possibly keep up with the amount of restaurants, the demand of complaints, the housing inspections, and support that we do for all of those segments. So we do a good job. We could do a lot better work if we had more time to do the work that we do and more staff to do it.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Councilor O'Malley.
I guess I apologize. I just wanted to follow up on my mass in motion question. I guess I don't
Oh,
understand.
sorry. There was plenty of information earlier. That's why we got your answer.
So can that money be used to pay for the transportation planner?
No. It's $50,000. I don't know how you'd be able to do that and finish the food assessment and the complete streets work that we've started. So
complete streets would be part of that. I would assume, at least. So after this year, could it be shifted to the transportation planner?
Not to my knowledge.
Or I guess I have to do more research on what this grant is.
I'll get a packet together for you.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Councilor Crowe, did you have your hand here?
Yes, I did this time. Thank you, Councilor Kamel. Mr. Webb, we talked a lot about kind of like the nurses, the school nurses being really an invaluable resource, and the school's going to be out technically in a couple of weeks. So is there anything as we sort of go forward, is there any way, I'm not sure, again, this would be a budget, obviously it's a budget meeting, but how to keep some of those maybe nurses on, because again, hopefully the numbers keep going down and they're not as many required. However, if we have any uptake or anything else, as anything else is coming on, you're going to need that extra support.
Yes, we have Patty Tremendozzi has always been, a supporter. she and her staff will be leaving us next week. We will be talking to some of the nurses who are going on their break to see if they want to come back in either volunteer or contract. We've got a line on some student nurses that we could possibly get for free. We will be using the state's contact tracing commission to do the positive test resulting in phone calls where we can. So we won't ever really have a problem being able to get people notified and educated based on the plan we came up with this morning. And I think we're looking at, there was 5 people that we thought we were going to have for the late August period, which is where I want it to be. And we'll just use the state's contact tracing in between now and then. We should be fine. The numbers, I only need them when the numbers are coming in at, say we had days where there were 60 positives a day. If we get to that point where there's 20 positives a day, we'll start up those 5 people, bring the phone calls back in-house, and only send certain types over to the CTC. So we have a plan.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Webb. It was very informative. I want to thank you on behalf of Ward 6 and the rest of the council here for what you do every day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, do we have, puts us right on time, or almost 1 minute over. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, Counselor.
Second it.
Di Maria, seconded by Council Condon. I'm just going to do a voice vote here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, seeing none, we are adjourned.